Hey everybody, my name is Amy Miller and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey,
Amy.
My sobriety birth date is January the 1st of 2003. And I'm going to move this, otherwise I will play with it. I am very ADD sometimes, and I'll get very distracted. I do have a home group, and it is the primary purpose group of Wilson, and we meet on Mondays and Thursdays from 7 to 8. And the first three no, hold on, wait a minute. I was getting ready to give you the Came to Believe group. That was the group that I belonged to for the biggest chunk of my sobriety. But so my primary purpose group, our meeting schedule is that the first and the third Mondays we study out of the big book. The second Monday we study the step that coincides with the month. The fourth Monday we study the tradition that coincides with the month. If there's the fifth Monday, we study AA history, believing that if our history is extremely important. The longer I stay sober, the more I realize how true that is, because I want to learn from my history so as to what not to repeat. I wish I could tell you that I learned that lesson well, but I don't. I continuously want to try to, this time it'll be different. But that's a definition of insanity, and I usually fit that bill a lot of times. Friday nights on Thursday nights we are open speaker meeting, and so we've got an open speaker going on right now at my home group, and I love my home group. My home group was where I learned how to have relationships with other human beings, because prior to coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know how to do that. I hated women. Women were my competition. You were prettier than I was. You were smarter than I was. Your man was better looking than mine. I was petrified you were going to take my man, or I wanted your man. And it was all grades and levels of competition. And the best thing y'all could do was stay in your ball game, and I'll stay in mine. Stay away from mine, And men, y'all can about imagine how that one went down. My home group was literally where I learned how to have appropriate relationships with men and with women. My home group taught me how to get angry with people and to not hate them and to be done with them, but to work through that anger. And just because we have a difference of opinion doesn't mean that I have to hate you for the rest of my life and have to sit and plot and plan your demise and how I'm going to get back at you. Because those are the things that consumed my life when I was in active alcoholism. Those things that if I don't stay connected with my home group, with the God of my understanding, with the sponsor, that I can get wrapped up into today. Alcohol has zero to do with that, actually. My mind can do that stuff all on its own. Alcohol just accelerates it a little bit, particularly tequila. Tequila is like pouring gasoline on it. But so I am a very strong proponent of home group. Sponsorship was the first woman I allowed into my life to teach me how to have a relationship with another woman. She was a woman that was nothing like me. I'm extremely loud, I'm extremely boisterous, very opinionated, and will let you know extremely quickly what my opinion is usually, especially if I'm very passionate about it. She is the polar opposite of me, very quiet, very peaceful, very soft-spoken, just totally not me. I'm like a bull in a china shop. Just come in, just and what's so funny is women like myself are attracted to her for some reason. She's got a whole slew of us that I don't know how she maintains it, but she kind of herds the cats with us, and so I'm not one of those ones that came in and picked someone that was just like me. No, what I did was I came in and I picked someone that had something that I was attracted to. Someone that had what I wanted my life to look like. Someone that looked like they actually enjoyed being alive. Because when I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous, this isn't my first time at the program. It's not my first time with any with a little bit of time of being sober. So when I came back, what I wanted was to learn how to be happy about being sober. I wanted to learn how to live, and because I didn't learn how to do that before. So that's what I did. I picked a woman that looked like she was enjoying life. And what she was she was plugged into the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. She was involved in service work. She was involved in a home group. But the biggest thing that she did and my home group did was turn me on to a relationship with God. Prior to my involvement with them, I believed in God and I believed in Jesus. I just didn't believe either one of those two entities wanted to have anything to do with my life. I believed that I had either broken or considered breaking all the commandments, knew I was going to hell, so why not just, let's tear the doors down, And I didn't know how to have relationships with human beings, much less a relationship with something I couldn't see. So that was where it was really vital for me to have a human in my life to show me how to develop that relationship. And it was just through taking some simple actions and to take some simple suggestions that didn't seem like suggestions. They seemed more like demands. But I started off getting introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous through my dad. And I'm actually an example of knowing about the program Alcoholics Anonymous, knowing about the disease of alcoholism before I ever took my first drink. My dad was sober for 31 years in AA when he passed away. And for a long time, he was my excuse for not being an alcoholic because I didn't drink the way he drank. He was a 2-5 a day, never took a sober breath kind of alcoholic. And I never drank the way he drank. And so when he got sober, I was 14. And, I wasn't one that I don't remember sitting around blaming myself for his alcoholism. He wasn't violent. He was very mouthy. But typically he was a traveling drunk. He would like to get drunk and have to go travel. He would go tour Nash County is what he'd call it. And then he'd come back and he'd be tore up. And we were farmers, and so, their schedule was he would have a lot of time that was spent really being busy, but then he'd have a lot of time that was not busy, like when the crops weren't in. And that was when he would really drink hard. And my mother, she never drank. She was that Al-Anon that was busy trying to control things. And she was all about the control. And she was a Leo, and so she had this huge, I got this. And so I had I have an older brother. And him and my dad didn't get along at all. And so I saw a lot of disagreement between them because he was older during that period of time, and he really kind of took the brunt end of my dad's drinking more so than I, because I was so young, and I was the baby girl also. But he gets sober, and I can remember I had this unique ability to hear what I want to hear. It might not necessarily be exactly what you said, but it's what I heard you say, so it becomes my truth, right? And so what I heard all my life is that I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. My brother used to sing the little song, Fatty, Fatty, 2x4, couldn't get through the bathroom door. Okay, so I grew up thinking that I was this huge, gross, obese person. We got into a discussion about that not long ago, and he's like, I was just kidding. I said, well, you know what? All of those therapists that I saw for that eating disorder that I had, really thank you for that one. And he's like, oh, I didn't mean it. I was like, okay, yeah. The first time I tried to commit suicide over that one, they really thank you for that one. And that was was me. I mean, was very sensitive to everything. I was sensitive to how you felt about me. I was sensitive to what you thought about me. My greatest fear has always been what you think of me. And I will do stupid stuff behind what I think you think of me. God forbid I know what you think of me. And so this is how I am before I ever took my first drink. So my dad gets sober, and I find my first alcohol. And he had left some tall Colt 45s out in the barn, and I found them. And when I found them, I instinctively knew that I needed to hide them. And I hid them and waited for the right person, the right victim, so that I could invite her over and we could have a party, become women. Because I don't know why we associate drinking with being grown, but I did. And invited her over. And I knew that drinking and smoking went together. And so I stole some of my dad's full-flavored Winston cigarettes. But what I didn't know and I didn't understand was the whole etiquettes behind eating and drinking, right? So understand that I have this other unique thing about me is that more. I'm all about more and enough. I don't know what enough is, right? So before we go into this drinking ceremony, we had a bowl. Now let me explain to you what a bowl of cereal looks like to someone like me. A bowl of cereal is a half a box of cereal and a half a gallon of milk and a mixing bowl full of cereal. That is a bowl of cereal. So my favorite team at that time was Carolina Tar Heels. My favorite cereal was Blueberry cereal. If you don't know what that is, it's the stuff that turns your milk Carolina blue. So I had this bowl of cereal, locked ourselves in my room and pulled out this hot Colt 45, cheered we're going to become women, and opened it, took a couple of pulls off of it, and I sprayed the inside of my Carolina blue trash can the same color on the inside as it was on the outside. Poured the rest of that hot beer down the drain, and I can remember having a conversation with my friend, and I said, you know what? I don't understand why my dad just spent 28 days locked up in treatment behind something that tasted that god-awful. I'm going to tell you what, if I got to drink that to become whatever that thing is he is, you ain't got to worry about it. I will never, ever be one of those. And that lasted until I found Sun Country wine coolers. So now I'm dating myself because if you know what Sun Country wine coolers are, you know it comes in a 2-liter bottle. And you know about how old I am. And they had those, and so I had my 2-liter, you had your 2-liter, or excuse me, you had our 2-liter, and I had my 2-liter. And I could actually tolerate those because it was tutti frutti. I couldn't taste the alcohol, and it was wonderful. And when the magic of alcohol finally took effect for me, and what that magic of alcohol looked like for me is you constantly talked to my head all the time. You told me I wasn't good enough. You told me I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't enough. And what alcohol would do for me is it would shut you up in my head long enough, not that I thought I was better than you or worse than you, but that I could just be in your presence and not want to die. And that's what alcohol did for me. It just allowed me to be. And so once that happened for me, it was on. I was not one that liked to sit around and sip. I did not like particularly the way it tasted. I could tolerate it, but I didn't like the way it tasted. Never developed the taste for it. Then again, I didn't have what they've got today with about 9 million different flavors of choices either. We had two vodkas. We had blue and we had red. You either had 80 or you had 100. There wasn't none of these 900 different flavors. I might have had a better drinking career for that I had that, but I didn't. I mean, we had Everclear. I mean, you went from Everclear to vodka. I mean, you know, and I just. It was something. I would go through periods of where I would try to figure out what was wrong with me, because clearly something was wrong with me, and I was willing to admit that I had I needed something to. always looking outside of whatever. When I get a house, when I get a car, when I get a job, whenever I get whatever it is, when I get out of school, when it gets summertime, when it gets this, always looking for something other than where I'm at right now. Whenever the next phase comes, then my life's going to be better. Whenever I get, then my life's going to be better. And so I'm in high school. My automatic reaction is what I need to do is get away from Rocky Mount, get away from my mom and dad, because they're my problem. And so I decided that I needed to get married, right? Because going to college and getting a degree and all that, I was like, wow, it's just find a man, right? And I love men in uniform. So on spring break, I met a Marine. And everybody knows that Marines, they party hard and they work hard and they party hard. And I'm all about, and my maiden name is Jones, and I'm all about, not keeping up with the Joneses, but I'm about setting the bar. So I got to set the bar high. And so it was just crazy, and that's where my drinking kind of started amping up a little bit. After I graduated from high school and my first year in college, convinced this man that we needed to get married. And that lasted for about 7 months. First 6 months was great because he was in California and I was here. It was that last month that we had to physically reside together. That was a little bit of a challenge. He had gotten out of the Marine Corps for failure to conform to military standards, i.e. he was a drunk, wouldn't go get treatment, and I had graduated from college, so we went to Cleveland to make our life. And that lasted a month, and I turned my tail in and came right back home to Mom and Daddy. And I was like, you know what, y'all were right. And I hated to admit that. Now, another thing about my personality is I am extremely headstrong, extremely rebellious. It's particularly when it comes to my mother. If I wanted to go left and she told me to go left, I was going to go right just to spite her. I could not wrap my head around doing anything that woman told me to do. And the mere fact she told me that I was completely ruining my life and I was going to get that marriage annulled made me that much more determined that no, I wasn't. Until I lived with him. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm willing to buy that. And so I came back home and ended up going and finishing out my 2 more years of school. And in that time, I started questioning whether or not I had a problem with my drinking. Not really so much my drinking, but my irrational behavior. Okay, I was willing to buy into that. And I had heard, I remember, I'm all about hearing stuff. What I thought I heard was that Al-Anon was all about learning how to deal with my dad's drinking, right? And that's what I was going to go do. Now, mind you, my dad had been sober at this point, 6 years. But I'm going to go learn how to deal with his drinking, right? And so I started going to Al-Anon, went to a convention, and met him. And him was one of y'all. And me and him immediately fell in lust that weekend and started dating. And I had enough drunk stories at that point that I laid it out for him. And remember, it's all about what you think of me. And so I laid it out. I said, what do you think? Do you think I'm an alcoholic? And then what I heard this man tell me is that, yes, I think you're an alcoholic. Yes, I think you need to come in here and tell everybody you're an alcoholic because that's that much more time we can spend together. It's that much more we have in common. I think it would be a wonderful idea for you to be an alcoholic. What he actually said is you might have a problem drinking. But it wasn't what I heard. So I came in, I told everybody I was an alcoholic. And he had this thing that I had never heard of up until this point, and it was called a sponsor. And his sponsor got with him and said, look, if she's a newcomer, you need to leave her alone for the first year. Otherwise, you are violating or you are practicing, which ain't a good thing, the 13th step that's up there. The one you can't read, the one that's written up there at the bottom, this, in that invisible ink. And so he comes and he has this conversation with me. Now, the way that the actual conversation went is, you're a newcomer, you need to come in here, you need to get grounded in the program, find a relationship with God, get a sponsor, work all the steps. And after a year, when you get better, let's have this conversation again, kind of see where we're at, and we'll go from there. Was not what I heard. What I heard, you took my man from me. And I was immediately pissed with Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was my first resentment. And so I was an intelligent woman, though. He wasn't the only man that was in here. Not all of y'all had sponsors, and if you had them, you weren't listening to them. So what I can tell you is I was a 21-year-old hot mess in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm sure nobody here has ever fit that bill. I know I'm unique in that. And so I created quite a havoc, stir. And after about 3 months, decided I need to go work at a treatment center. Was not where I needed to be working. And then after 3 months of that, decided that, now here's my logical 6 months sober thinking. Oh, well, actually, 3 months sober thinking. Okay, it was 6 months at that time. My favorite thing, I loved movies. I always wished I'd have been an actress. Today, thank God I was not an actress, because I promise you I would be dead. Or I would be caught up in some cut up beyond anything that is imaginable. There's no doubt. My favorite movies were Top Gun, Navy SEAL, and Under Siege. My 6 months sober thinking connected all that and said, what I need to do is join the Navy. And meet Tom Cruise, Steven Seagal, or Charlie Sheen, because then my life will be wonderful. Swear to God. So I joined the Navy. And I made it through basic training, sober, and came home. I was home for 2 weeks on my leave. Went to 2 Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. One was to pick up my 9-month chip that I earned. And then the other one was to come back and kind of, not really rub it in your face, but kind of negotiate why y'all were making such a big deal about changing my playmates and playgrounds, because I'm a bar drinker. I love a bar. Love the lights, the drama, the smell, the chaos. Love loud music. Love to dance. Just love a bar. All the rest of that 2 weeks was spent with my new boyfriend, the Navy recruiter, at the bar. I was drinking Coke, he was drinking whatever he was drinking, because we were listening to music and dancing, having a good old time. And so I was like, I don't know why y'all are making such a big deal about this. I have just successfully done this. And y'all kind of did what you did. You laughed at me. You know, okay. And so I went off to Meridian, Mississippi, home of Jim Holmes. And I met some people on the plane. And based in the knowledge that I had at that moment, they asked me to go to the base bar. And I was like, you know what? There's no reason for me not to go. I said, sure, I'll go with you. And, you know, I hated beer. God, I hated beer. I hated Bud beer the worst, though. So the guy, he asked, the waitress asked the guy next to me what he'd have. He said, I'll have a Bud Light. And she looked at me, she said, well, what do you have? And it just like, as fluid as I'm talking, it just rolled off my tongue. I said, I'll have what he's having. You know, not once did I think about, hey, you know, you just picked up a 9-month chip. This is probably not really a good idea. Never once did I think about y'all. Never once did I think about God. I'm sure God was there, but I certainly wasn't listening to him. And what that would start for me would be daily drinking for the next 3.5, 4 months. Not a day would go by that I wouldn't be drunk. And, you know, I started at that point getting in trouble for my drinking. I started suffering some consequences behind it. Waking up in stairwells, waking up in ditches, waking up in barracks I didn't belong in. Imagine that. You know, it started going before the captain for all that behavior. You know, I did start questioning. I remember having conversations with my petty officers about maybe, you know, I kind of might have lied when I came in, because I think I might have a problem with my alcoholism and with drinking. And they were like, and I can remember they were like, well, we have an AA meeting on base. And I'm like, really? And in the morning, that sounded like a really good idea. But when 4 o'clock came and my buddies are going to the bar, you know what? I was being a little dramatic. I mean, I was just being a little dramatic this morning. I'm good. I'll catch y'all tomorrow. You know, I got my buddies I got to go hang out with. And and that's pretty much what the whole entire 4 months was. And I graduated top of my class, though, believe it or not. And I can remember coming up to the little stand, and they had the little thing. At this point, I'm single. I'm supposed to be going overseas. It's the early 90s. A lot of activity going on overseas. Had some really cool places I could have gone. One stateside. And it was in Coronado, California. And I was like, I had the name in front of it, and it was SDB Team 1. I was like, SDB Team 1? I was like, what is that? They were like, SEAL Delivery Team 1. I was like, SEAL is in the Navy SEALs? And he was like, yeah. I said, that's what I want. I'll take Charlie Sheen. Thank you very much. That's how I made intelligent decisions about my life, is I'm going to California to look for Charlie Sheen. The fact that my college roommate was already there, that was just further confirmation that God wanted me in California. And so that's how I ended up in Coronado, California. And what I can tell you about that place is that it was the early 90s, and there was a lot of stuff going on, and my alcoholism went to a whole nother level. I got exposed to a lot of things that this little country girl from North Carolina had never seen of, heard of, nor knew existed. And it was crazy. I met the second ex-husband. Only in Alcoholics Anonymous can you say something like that and everybody's laughing at you. I get that. Your second ex-husband. Yup. But I didn't marry him again, so I don't have that piece of the story. But I met second ex-husband in California. He was also in the Navy. He was a Seabee, and up until my involvement with this man, today thanks to the program and the grace of a loving God and the steps and a lot of hard work and a lot of soul searching and time really, I'm able to tell you a little bit more accurate, hopefully, story about this man. Because today I am extremely grateful to him for a lot of stuff. When I came back to y'all, though, and for probably about the first 7 years of my sobriety, he was the biggest reason, I was the biggest victim you would ever laid your eyes on. Prior to my involvement with this man, if you were to come to me and tell me that your significant other were treating you anything less than the lady that you deserve to be treated, I would have looked at you with judgment, I would have looked at you with condemnation, and I would have had this really arrogant conversation with you, as in, why would you let another man treat you that way? How dare you let a man put his hands on you? And I would start this whole neck rolling, I hope a man puts his hands on me, and I'd get the whole neck rolling thing going, and I'd tell you what I was going to do. And what I can tell you is that this man gifted me, and I do believe it today to be an absolute gift to have those conversations with women today. And I look at them with love and understanding, and I say, I absolutely understand why you did what you did, why you stayed, and why you allowed your children to witness and experience the things that they experienced, because I too was involved. And it's something that I can't explain nor help you understand why, but through the steps, through time, through a lot of prayer, you can come out the other end of that and learn a great deal about yourself, because that's been my experience with that. Also been my experience that it doesn't go away all the time. Certain things trigger it. These things right here trigger it for me. Didn't know that until this pandemic. This pandemic has created a lot of triggers for me, but I'm grateful today for that, because I needed to see some of those things, because I had gotten extremely complacent on a lot of things. But I'll talk about that. So I got involved with this man. He was my drinking partner for a long time. He drank harder than I drank, and he was good looking. He was dating about 5 women, so he became my immediate challenge. I'm all about a challenge, you know. I'm going to change him. And I, after 3 months, convinced this man that we needed to get married. And that's what we did. We got married and got immediately pregnant with my son. And I ended up, I was supposed to be going to Hawaii, but I ended up staying in California when all that happened. And Mom and Dad were really angry because it was 95. It was the international convention. Mom and Dad had already booked their plane tickets to go out to the international convention in '95, and here I up and skirt, and that one didn't go over well. But anyway, so I ended up, he got kicked out, and I pulled the I'm going to commit suicide card, and they said, you know what, you got a personality disorder, you need to go. And I thought for a long time that the doctor was just doing me a favor. Today I know that he was dead on with his diagnoses. I was absolutely bona fide crazy. There's no doubt. But we ended up moving back to the East Coast and doing that whole geographical cure, you know. Had my son in Florida, moved back home to North Carolina, because, you know, it's always going to be different here. It's going to be different there. That's the problem. This is the problem. And I did stop drinking, because for whatever reason I did buy into the whole fetal alcohol syndrome deal. I wish I could stand up here and tell you I was sober, but I can't do that. But I did stop drinking, but I was extremely angry because he continued to drink and do what I wanted to do. And when I drank to one or two places. I drank to either pass out or black out, and I knew that I couldn't do that and raise a child. For whatever reason, I grasped that much. So the first 4 years of our marriage was extremely volatile. We had 2 children during that period of time. After 4 years, I ended up, after one particularly bad evening, calling the cops and having him removed from the home. And when that happened, what that gave me the opportunity at that point was to now take my kids and drop them off with my mom and dad on the weekend. My brother's playing in a band, and so it gave me instant rock star status, you know, because now I can run the roads with my brother. And mom and dad were taking care of the kids. I could do what I wanted to do. And so that was what I did, and that lasted a month. When I hit the ground, I hit it hard. And after about a month, I have my boss coming in, my mom and dad coming in, and everybody wants to talk to Amy about her behavior. And I didn't know why they were making such a big deal about everything. I mean, I hadn't burnt the house down. They needed to just calm down. And I wasn't willing to talk to you about my drinking, but I was willing to talk to you about the fact that I knew my mental status was not what it needed to be. And under those pretenses, I ended up in my first inpatient treatment center. And after my first night of being there, when I started coming off of the litany of stuff that I had been on, I realized that there was more to this than I was giving credit to it. So I ended up going to the CD side in the evening and the psych side in the morning. Came out of there and got plugged into Alcoholics Anonymous, actually. Started going to AA. You know, what I heard, again, was that meeting makers make it. So I heard that all I need to do is go to meetings, right? And just absorb. My experience today is that meetings, and I will say this after the pandemic has now started, meetings are extremely important. However, they are just one thing of a lot of things that I do to stay sober. But I, at that point, was just going to a lot of meetings and a lot of different meetings. I didn't have a home, I had a home group in name only, but for me today, what I know to be a home group was not what I understood a home group to be then. What I understood a home group to be then was just somewhere I would go to a meeting. You know, you get there right at, the meetings were at that point, you know, were 8 to 9. I'd get there right at 8 o'clock, sit through my meeting, and I'm gone. Getting to know you, getting to know your family, getting to know who you are, developing a relationship. Women still want my gig. You know, I mean, y'all look okay, but, you know, and I'm married, and we're separated, and I'm kind of scorned, so y'all really ain't my fans. So, I mean, I was just starting to become very isolated, you know. So after a month, and my relationship with God, I kind of had told you what that was like. I believed that they existed. I just didn't believe it wanted to have anything to do with me. The biggest thing with me and God, this is no lie, this is how arrogant I am. I believe in fair, right? I believe that if you have something or you get something, that it is my entitled right to have the same. For instance, I knew that Moses had the burning bush, Bill Wilson had the bright light. I had heard people talk about the angels and seeing them. Where was my angel? Where was my bright light? And where was my burning bush? I had called on God. I had asked for him to show his face. I had done the whole, if any religion had, I grew up Southern Baptist, but I don't care what the religion was. If it said you do X and you will get Y, I had done it. And no God, no nothing, no whatever. And I was like, you know what? Pfft, why bother? Clearly he doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And so after a month of not drinking and taking any mind-altering things, I had what I like to call a come to Jesus meeting with God. And what that pretty much looks like is me in the middle of the floor, screaming and crying, slinging snot. God, where are you? Why are you allowing this to happen in my life? What am I supposed to be learning? Blah, 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 blah. This whole kind of dramatic event. And I went to bed that night thinking completely that I was going to have a dream and he was going to hover over my bed. Just knew that was going to be my moment. Imagine my anger when I woke up the next morning and nothing. And for whatever reason, I knew that I needed to go to a meeting, and I went to a meeting. And what I can tell you is the events that happened at that meeting, I could not humanly explain. There were things that happened at that meeting that only God could have happened. Only God could have allowed them to happen. And at that moment, I became absolutely 100% convinced that God not only wanted to have a part of my life, but that he actually cared about me. Now, that ain't my sobriety date. So what that was just a really cool doctoral experience like Bill had with Winchester Cathedral, It was just a really cool spiritual experience. I never once questioned his existence again. But what I did was I failed to develop that relationship with him. That's what I didn't do. I just believed. So I would go on for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 more months. The ex would come back home. He would start going to AA as well. He would get involved. The first year of our sobriety, it was perfect. It was like the honeymoon that we never had. His name is Adrian, mine's Amy. A and A, it was God-given, right? That's what we needed. We just needed to be sober. God had ordained it, right? That was great up until about a year sober. And I started sponsoring women. And he wanted to help me out with that. All kind of went sideways. And I became extremely angry and very resentful. And a black cloud of anger just fell on me. And not so much, the surprising weird thing about that is not so much with women, but with him. Which was highly unusual. Usually my anger was directed at women. But I directed it at him, and I could just never get over it. No matter how many steps I took, no matter how many inventories I wrote, I was absolutely unwilling to take any actions that a sponsor told me to take because I perceived that it was going to hurt at a level that I could not tolerate. And for me, everything was about how I felt. If I felt like doing it, I would do it. If I didn't feel like doing it, I didn't do it. And I didn't like pain. I mean, yeah, I realize I'm living in pain, but that pain I understand. That pain I know. So that pain I'll tolerate. But the pain to get from here to there, and you're telling me, I just was not willing to make that sacrifice. And so after 3 years of that kind of, whatever you want to call it, when he finally ended up leaving, fear set in on me in a way I cannot explain. It absolutely crippled me. And I became paralyzed with fear. And So I ended up doing what we do, or what I do. I got into another relationship, and I got into a relationship with a newcomer. And when that newcomer relapsed, I went out right behind him. And what would end up being 3.5 weeks of literally almost dying, literally looking at prison time, I ended up throwing up my hands and calling 911. And they, if you've never picked up the phone and called 911 and told them you're going to commit suicide, let me explain to you the events that are getting ready to take place. Anything and everything that has got lights on top of it will show up in a pair. And they come in like SWAT, going boom. I mean, why do you have to send the cops and the sheriff and the highway patrol? I mean, it was one not enough. I mean, the fire truck and the ambulance, I mean, was one not enough. And I never forget, there was a lady that walked through the door and she said, "Did someone call for help?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, that was me." And what that started for me was 4 different treatment facilities over the next 3 months. And I came out of those facilities, and I had no house, no car, no job, no nothing. But I was not living in a halfway house. I mean, I don't know where you think I'm living, but it ain't going to be a halfway house. And I lived with my mother and father, who at that time lived in the country, for 1 week. And I said, "You know what? I am now willing to live in the street if you get me away from these people." And thank God for a dear, sweet Al-Anon lady. That was she was running the halfway house, the women's halfway house in Rocky Mount, and she opened up her home. And there's no doubt that that woman was one of the Al-Anon women that was in my mom's ear, telling my mom what to do with me at that point. Because up until that point, my mom and dad had always come in and rescued me. They'd always gotten me out of my troubles. They had always nursed me back to health and get me back on my feet, and had always done whatever needed to be done. And at that point, they said, "You know what? We're done. We're done. We're not doing anything else for you. We've got your children, and that's where you're not ruining them, but we're done." And so I went and I got into the halfway house, and I wish I could tell you that I got my home group and my sponsor, and I stand before you today. That did not happen. What I did was I started going to the same AA meetings, doing the same thing, and got into another relationship. And this one was, even though he was a newcomer, he wasn't a newcomer, he was a retread. I mean, he'd had 9 months, so he wasn't technically a newcomer. And I had 4 years, so I wasn't technically a newcomer. Y'all just make a big deal out of that. And when he left me 2 weeks later for a woman with a car, I said, "You know what, that's my bottom," And I tell that story, 1, because I need to remind myself of that stuff. 2, because it's funny. And 3 is because it's a reminder to me that I can't be the judge of what someone's bottom should be, what someone's bottom looks like, or what circumstance will push them to a point of surrender. Because it would look like that almost dying, almost going to prison, losing everything monetarily and all your relationships, spending 90 days locked up in treatment. Those would be enough things to maybe present the case to someone that they might want to change. Not me. It was being left by a guy that was not that cute. I definitely wasn't in love with, for a woman with a car. I was done. I was like, that's it. And that's when I went and asked Sandy to be my sponsor. And I said, "You scare me. I'm petrified of you." And for me, and the reason that was so significant to me is because I knew that was what she was going to say. I knew that was my final straw. She was going to say, "You've got to leave relationships alone and get sober." And at that point, I was willing to give that up. And we started working the program, and we started, reading the big book. The book came alive for me. It came alive in my life, and my life slowly started to change. I started to have genuine relationships with other people. I stayed in that halfway house for 1 week shy of a year. Ended up moving in with one of my home group members. Learned how to have a sister that I never thought that I wanted, and ended up living with her for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I ended up getting a job that I've been at today now for going on 18 years. I couldn't say somewhere 18 days before getting involved with y'all. I mean, to be able to sit here and tell you I've been somewhere for 18 years it's hard for me to even wrap my head around that. Just the pure gratitude of that. Because I'm all about, I feel sick. I don't feel like going to work today. So I'm just going to call in sick, right? That don't last but so many times. And, my sponsor called wind. I started doing that, actually, with my first job at Sears that I hated. Mm-hmm. And she caught wind of it on day 2. And she said, I don't care if you throw up all the way to Sears, you better have your butt on that cat bus going to the mall. And I'm like, okay. But it was that level. I needed that in order to become disciplined enough to be able to get up on the days that I don't feel like getting out of bed and going to work. I needed to show up, and I needed to be the best employee that they could be. And Jim Holmes used to always ask, did you go to work today? Yeah, I went to work today. Did you give them all day? I said, yeah, I gave them 8 hours. I actually gave them 9 because I worked too much. He's like, well, don't give them too much. But, and so the relationships I started developing and the things that people other than my sponsors started telling me, my life just started to change. I became active in the prisons. I became active in other women's lives, started sponsoring people. And then my job afforded me the opportunity to start doing some really cool stuff. I got tickets to a NASCAR event, and what would have been a really appropriate, cool time to have invited a man, because that would have been like a really cool time. Say, hey, you want to go to a NASCAR event? That'd be like, I asked my dad to go with me, which is absolutely unheard of. I would have done that. And so slowly we started to do stuff like that together. We would go to NASCAR events and do different things together. And we started to develop a relationship. My mother started acting really stupid, and really stupid, like us when we were like in active drinking. And we didn't understand that a whole lot. So we took her to the doctor thinking she might have a brain tumor. And they came back and said, no, she's got something, I forgot what they called it, atrophy to the brain or something like that. And I'm like, what's that? They were like, it's nothing really. And I'm like, okay, all right, well, atrophy is kind of like, what is that? They were like, well, it's sort of kind of like Alzheimer's, but it's okay. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Alzheimer's, I understand. That one we need to back up and discuss a little bit. And ultimately what ended up she was diagnosed with was frontal temporal dementia. And if you don't know what that is, it's dementia that affects the front and the temporal of your brain. And what it does is it affects your personality, who you are, your personality, and how you interact and take care of yourself and that kind of stuff, your inhibitions, your desires, whatever. And so her behavior changed like overnight dramatically. And which is why she looked like what we look like in the middle of drinking. She was doing some really bizarre stuff. And so the matriarch of the family now needed someone to come in and take care of things. And I had a great deal of fear behind that, because at the time, the then sponsor I had would sit down and have conversations with me. And he never told me what to do, but he would always, well, Amy, I can tell you what I would do if it were my family. I'd be like, oh, okay. I hear you, Jerry. And, you know, and so slowly what I did was I started stepping up and taking part in my family's life, and started helping my dad take care of the finances, you know, and so from being the person that always sucked the life out of my family financially, who had through amends that you had taught me, had made that amends financially back to my family, particularly to my dad, and had paid him back. He had built enough respect and trust in me to turn his finances over to me. Completely unheard of. And so for almost 5 years I did that. And then he was killed in 2015, motorcycle riding. And he is actually the one that got me involved in riding. And you know, and we had started going to Rolling Thunder together every year, and he was going to the beach that day, and anyway, I got that phone call that, you know, you never want to get, and so literally overnight, I became responsible for my mother's care, who by this point now was in the bed, was bedridden, and so a tremendous amount of fear hit me again of, I can't do this, you know, and what God did was he showed up, you know, and he placed in front of me people that I needed every time, you know, to just give me that one more little to know that I could make it through. And so for the next 5 years, my daughter and I would take care of my mom, and try to make the end of her life comfortable, and to show up and be that amends, you know, to take care of her like she had always taken care of me when I was a mess, you know. And so she passed away in September of last year, and before all this COVID crap hit, thank God. And you know, and so things have just have been different. You know, I got the opportunity to write that relationship, and here come my children who have blessed me with the ability to see more clear the harm that I caused my parents, as well as they've also given me the ability to see just how much my parents loved me no matter what I did. You know, and so what I know today is that as long as I continue to stay connected to y'all, and to stay on this path, my journey continues to grow, and I continue to learn things, and I continue to see that, you know. And through the pandemic, I you know, when it first hit, I had for about 4 years had kind of stepped back and had stopped with my taking care of my mother and becoming involved in a relationship with a non-one of y'all. Had kind of stepped away from being as active, and I was doing what you probably would call bare minimum, right? Going to home group, working with a sponsor, sponsoring some women. That was about it. And pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, now I things that I did not know about myself, I physically need you in my life. You know, I'll never forget the first meeting we had when the whole thing started, and I walked in the door. I'm used to the world losing their mind. That I'm used to. I ain't used to y'all losing your mind. And when I walked through the door and everybody went like this and like, get away from me, that hit me in the heart in a way I cannot explain. It was that pain that I felt when I drank. You know, that stabbing, you're not good enough, something's wrong with you, you got a disease, stay away from me. And I didn't know it then, And what I did was I reacted, and I reacted angrily. I was like, what is this? You told me God was, or God either is or he isn't. One day and everybody's going to cower? What? You know? And so it took me really hard. The last 10 months have been extremely difficult for me to wrap my head around some things. That was probably the hardest. But I have realized I need you physically in my life. There's a strength that happens in this room. It doesn't happen on that computer. Not for me. People can do it. And if you can, more power to you. But I can't get it. And so I realized that today. And which lets me know I need to be here with you. And I will never be well to the point where I can't not. And so that's why, people like Wallace, people like Tom, show up. Because I think they too are like me, and they need you. So I thank you so much for your time, attention, and so much for my life and my sobriety. And thank y'all.
Thank you.